Jets fans have to love what they saw in Cade Klubnik's preseason debut, but this team will sink or swim in 2026 with Geno Smith. Let's discuss why today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm John B. from GanggreenNation.com, and today's episode is brought to you by Kalshi. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. On today's show, we have our weekly mailbag. Each Wednesday, we do a mailbag with listener questions. On today's episode, we'll discuss the dilemma the Jets face with everyone's new favorite player, Mory Bomba. We'll talk about how worried Jets fans should be about Omar Cooper playing with the second-team offense, especially when he's doing well in training camp and the preseason games. But we'll start by talking about everyone's favorite topic, the quarterback position. First question comes from Taylor, who writes, John, with by all accounts a solid camp and preseason, the Cade Klubnik hype is officially upon us. In all seriousness, I don't think any of us want to see him out there week one, as we all know what happens to Jets quarterbacks who are thrown immediately into the fire. That said, what kind of leeway do you think should be given to Geno Smith? In the event he struggles, won't the Jets want to take an extensive look at Klubnik, especially given the crucial decisions that await them in the 2027 draft? What are your thoughts? And yes, this is a very timely question because Cade Klubnik went out there in preseason week one and looked really good. I did a film breakdown the other day. I posted it to GanggreenNation.com. I'll post the link to the breakdown in the show notes in case you haven't seen it. My conclusion was that this was an encouraging first game for Cade Klubnik in the preseason. But it's one thing to say you went out there and looked good in 7 preseason passing attempts against backups and against, generally speaking, vanilla defenses. It's another thing to say you're ready to play in the NFL. Now, there's an old expression, the most popular guy in town is the backup quarterback. And I think as Jets fans, we're a little bit nervous about Geno Smith because Geno was here before. He was drafted in 2013, and that first stint did not go well. So I think even though we're hopeful with Geno, it's natural that we're kind of looking at him with a skeptical eye. And Jets just drafted Cade Klubnik. Most exciting time for us to be fans is when we've got hope in a young quarterback, because when a team's rebuilding, there's an essential piece. It's hitting on the quarterback. So what do the Jets do with Cade Klubnik? I think that the Jets should really try and avoid putting Klubnik on the field this year. Now, Taylor asked a great question because Taylor notes that the Jets do have some big decisions in the 2027 draft. They got those 3 first-round picks. So the dream is that Klubnik goes out there and looks really good. And suddenly, if we have the quarterback position solved, well, then we can use the 3 first-round picks to build up the rest of the roster. Wouldn't that be great? That'd just be tremendous. But I think realistically, Klubnik's probably a longer-term project. I think back to when I was watching him at Clemson, and there were a couple of things I liked. One thing I liked is that Klubnik threw with anticipation. Lots of college quarterbacks don't throw until their receivers are already breaking on their routes. And in the NFL, you got to throw before your receiver makes his break. You got to know where he's going. So if a receiver's cutting right, you got to throw before he cuts right, because defensive backs in the NFL are too sophisticated. If they see a guy breaking right, they'll close on it. So you have to throw before the break. So that way the defender doesn't have a chance to make a play on the ball, and the ball's on the receiver as soon as he makes his cut. So Klubnik did that. The other thing I liked about Klubnik is he kind of threw his guys away from hits, and that's critical. You don't want to have your quarterback lead your receiver right into big hits. If a receiver was heading into a big hit, I saw a number of occasions where Klubnik kind of threw the ball that forced the receiver to kind of slide and take that receiver away from big hits. But there were a lot of other things I think Klubnik needed to work on. I don't know that he's really developed in understanding complicated NFL reads that defenses throw out. I don't know that he's necessarily mastered a lot of the arts of the quarterback position at this point in time. And yes, I liked what he did in that first preseason game, but there were a couple of times I think he got fooled. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to bash Cade Klubnik. I would expect any 4th round pick in his first exhibition game in the NFL to be fooled, because defenses in the NFL are so complicated. You look at stuff as a quarterback that you've never seen before when you're a rookie in this league. So I think it's a lot to ask Cade Klubnik to go out there and play well at any point this year. And that's one of the reasons I really think that Klubnik should get the full preseason. I think that every snap in the exhibition season should either go to Geno Smith or Cade Klubnik. You give Geno as many snaps, as many reps as he thinks he needs to prepare for the season, then everything else goes to Klubnik. Because I don't think anything's being accomplished by throwing Bailey Zappi or Brady Cook out there. And Klubnik can get game action. He can get used to at least NFL game speeds, even if defenses are going to be vanilla. And if you put him out there in like the third, fourth quarter, he should be able to carve up defenses because those are full of guys who are like undrafted free agents and heading to the practice squad. And Klubnik was a fourth round pick who's going to be on the roster, who's probably going to be the Jets' number 2 quarterback. So he'll be in a position where it's likely he's going to succeed. And that's the kind of thing that's going to build his confidence up. Now, Taylor asked a great question. Again, don't the Jets need to evaluate Klubnik before the 27 draft? And I think my answer to that is they kind of did when they drafted him in the 4th round. They did not draft him in the 1st round. They did not draft him in the 2nd round. They did not even draft him in the 3rd round. They drafted him in the 4th round, which to me means you like the guy's tools. You think maybe we got something in the long run, but you're not totally sold. In fact, you're not remotely sold. I think when you draft a quarterback in the 1st round, that means, you know what, this is our guy. We really believe in him. You draft a quarterback in the 4th round, it's more, we'll see, maybe. Yeah, it's possible. And I think you also have to look at recent draft history. Who were the 4th round picks or later at quarterback who were ready to play in their rookie season? And there really aren't that many. I mean, you could talk Dak Prescott 10 years ago. You could talk Brock Purdy. I don't know that the list is much longer than that. And it's fair to say, hey, Klubnik's his own guy. Just because other guys at his position weren't ready who were drafted in the same range, that doesn't necessarily mean Klubnik won't be. And you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean that. But I think the reason it's relevant is you get a sense of whether the NFL in general, whether the 32 teams are good at figuring out which quarterbacks are ready to play on day one. And when you have so few fall to the 3rd day of the draft, it shows that the NFL usually knows the guys who are capable of playing on day one. Now, sometimes they whiff on it. Sometimes a 1st round pick is, in fact, not ready. But all the guys who are ready tend to go pretty early in the draft. Is Klubnik a guy who slipped through the cracks? Well, we certainly could hope so. But again, if he was ready to go in week 1, my guess is that he would have been drafted earlier. And if the Jets thought he was ready to go day 1, they certainly would have drafted him earlier. They certainly would not have left it up to chance him falling all the way to the 4th round. The way I think the Jets kind of have to view it is they have to go into the 2027 offseason with the assumption that they need a quarterback, unless Cade Klubnik does something to prove them wrong. And I know that Cade Klubnik can't do that unless he gets onto the field, but the fact they drafted him in the 4th round kind of means that they don't believe he's ready. And I think if we're looking realistically at that, the Jets are going to have to sink or swim with Geno Smith. Geno's the veteran they brought in. He's clearly the guy who's going to start. I think he's really the only option the Jets have to have a surprise season this year. And I wish I was more confident in Geno. If you're a Jets fan and you're saying, and I know there are lots of Jets fans who say this, that, I don't really feel that great about Geno as my starting quarterback. I mean, I'm kind of with you on that. But as much as I'd love Cade Klubnik to be a day 1 impact player at the quarterback position, I just think it's really unlikely. And I think that if Cade Klubnik's going to succeed in this league, it's probably not going to be till a couple of years down the line. Again, nothing wrong with taking a lottery ticket, because even though the odds are low, if by chance we get Dak Prescott or the next Brock Purdy and Klubnik, that's a fantastic thing. But I don't think you can go with the assumption that Klubnik is that guy. I think that it's just kind of one of those things that hits by accident. If for some reason Klubnik has to go into the lineup, then you can hope. But I don't think that that's the sort of thing you can count on at all. I think that Geno is going to have to be the guy until we get to a point, hypothetically, like Justin Fields last year, where you just had no choice but to make a change. And hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully Geno plays really well. I think it's Geno or bust this year. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about one of the key players Jets quarterbacks should be throwing to this year. That's Omar Cooper, but working with the second team offense. How worried should we be? I have some thoughts on that I'll give you as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by Kalshi. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division? Who makes the playoffs? Who's lifting the trophy at the end of the season? On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. Can the Jets win at least 7 games this season? Well, the Jets are currently trading at a 34% probability, meaning a $100 trade pays out $265.86 if they reach 7 wins. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. Trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. Kalshi, Kalshi. Trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Big shout out to you everydayers. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Let's continue now with our weekly mailbag. Our next question. John, you discussed how Omar Cooper was playing with the second-team offense in the preseason opener, but he played pretty well, and reports are he's having a strong week of training camp practice. Aren't the results on the field more important than who he's playing with? That is a great question. I think that it's kind of notable that Cooper was playing with the twos on Friday against Tampa Bay. That first series, the Jets played the starters. Cooper did not appear. Isaiah Williams played receiver with the starters, and he got a lot of work in the slot. It also was notable to me that the Jets were using Jamal Pritchett as a return guy a lot, not Williams. And I wonder whether that signals that Williams is in line for a starting role, because maybe they think he's a starting receiver. We don't want him returning kicks. I think that would be a mistake. Even if Williams is going to be a starter, I think you want him being dynamic in the return game. I don't think you want to lose that, because he was so good last year as a return guy. I mean, he contributed to probably 2 of the 3 Jets wins with returns that made a difference. I don't really know where Cooper stands right now. As I've been saying the last couple of days, he's 1 game into his preseason career. So I think anybody who's writing him off being a little silly. And I would not even write him off being a starter this year, because the Jets clearly like him. They moved up to get him. They moved up to get a 3rd first-round pick just to make sure they did not lose out on him. But it was somewhat notable to me that he was playing with the twos, because he did not appear on that first series. And I don't know what it is. Were the Jets trying to motivate him a little bit? Will he be in the starting lineup on Friday when the Jets play their second preseason game against Pittsburgh? Certainly hope so. But I don't think we can entirely write off the idea that Cooper's behind Isaiah Williams right now, because the Jets played the regular starters across the board on both sides of the ball on the first series on offense and the first series on defense, and Cooper wasn't with them. And it wasn't like a rookie thing, because David Bailey got the first series and then he was out of the game. Now, I know some of the other rookies are injured. Kenyon Sadiq's recovering from the hernia. You got D'Angelo Pons is recovering from a calf injury. So Bailey was the only guy who was comparable. But again, if it was a hard and fast rule with rookies, Bailey wouldn't have played with the first team. He would have gone in with the twos. So I don't know if the coaches are like unhappy with Cooper. I mean, maybe they just really like Isaiah Williams. I wouldn't be shocked based on what happened last year if the coaching staff was really high on Williams. But at the end of the day, Isaiah Williams is a guy who comes in with like 200 career receiving yards in 2 years. I don't think he would be playing ahead of your first round pick unless the coaches had a reason. Now, the question does make a very savvy point, though, that ultimately on-field performance matters. And again, he played well, and Cooper played well in that game Friday. He had a big catch right before the half to set up the Cade York field goal, which I don't know, may not have been a field goal, but Cooper made the catch. No, I question whether York made that field goal. I don't question whether Cooper made the catch. It was a big play right before the half, and the reports out of Jets camp are that he's having a strong week. So look, if he's going to get himself into the starting lineup, that's how it happens. He's going to go out there and play well. I think the whole Cooper saga is kind of a to be continued for me. I don't have enough information to say one way or another. Would I be shocked if week 1 comes, the Jets are in Nashville playing the Titans, we look at the first series and there's Cooper starting in the slot on the first play? No, I think that that's a reasonable thing to expect. But based on what we've seen so far, based on Williams' role, based on the reports that Williams himself is having a fantastic camp, would I be floored if Cooper was on the bench at the beginning of the season? Again, not really, but I don't think that this is the sort of thing where you write Omar Cooper off. Yeah, again, we're not very far into his career. He's got plenty of time to turn it around. So what I think you have to hope is that the strong play in the practices continue and the strong play in the exhibition games continue. And this is another guy where I don't mind if the Jets play him deep into the preseason games because I think the reps will probably help him. But it would be nice to see him out there with the starters on Friday because that would signal that the coaching staff views him as a viable first team option. I'm not sure whether they do. I can't say that they don't right now. I think this is one of those things where we're going to have to wait and see. I know none of us I hate it myself. I would love to have all the answers right now, but I think things are unclear right now. To the point of the question, though, yeah, Cooper going out there playing well, I think that that is significant. And if it continues, maybe we'll see him with the starters sooner rather than later. All right, let's move on. Our next question. John, I'm a little worried about backup center. Doesn't seem like the Jets did a good job there this offseason. Instead of Xavier Newman-Johnson, is it possible the Jets slide Tippmann back to center if there's an injury to Josh Myers and maybe we go and find a guard who can replace him? That's a good question as well. And the Jets have been criticized by a lot of people for not finding a quality backup center. Myself, I don't know if it's entirely fair because I think if you go across the rest of the league, if you look at the rosters, how many quality backup centers are there really? I think it was notable last year when the Jets signed Josh Myers because that's one of the rare times in the years I've been following the Jets that I was kind of comfortable with the backup center they had. You don't really have many Josh Myerses who signed to be backups in this league. For the most part, anybody who can play is a starter because there just aren't 32 quality NFL centers to begin with. I if you're upset that the Jets don't have a quality backup, I mean, what I'd ask you is who should the Jets have signed to be the backup center? And I don't think there's a good answer for that. And this speaks to something bigger is that I think in the NFL, there's really only one way to get depth consistently. And I think that's especially true on the offensive line, a position where quality is frequently very difficult to obtain. You have to hit on draft picks, particularly late round picks. And unfortunately, the previous GM, Joe Douglas, traded away an awful lot of his picks, and the few picks he kept did not really pan out. So I don't think it's really, personally, I don't think it's super fair to get on Darren Muji over this because I don't think that he's really responsible for the Jets' lack of depth. I think it's the previous GM. And look, I'm not going to give Muji an indefinite pass on this. A year or two from now, if the Jets don't have depth, it will definitely be on Muji because he'll have enough late round picks that some of them should have hit. But I don't think there was an obtainable guy in free agency who could have helped this team out. Would I like to see Tippmann slide back to center? I would not. And I've been pretty vocal about this, that I think Tippmann's better for the Jets at guard. I think the way the NFL defenses run these days make Tippmann a more valuable player at guard than center. I don't think we're in the days of Kevin Mawai and Nick Mangold where having a top-notch center is really important because the big nose tackles who line up at the zero technique, that's the spot right across from the center. That means you're head on with the center. They don't really exist anymore. And it's really more about defenses trying to penetrate. Center's more about kind of helping the quarterback figure out what the defense is doing, make sure all the blocking is set properly, snapping the ball, and then helping out, helping a guard or helping a guard to either side out with a double team. So I would not like to see Tippmann used in that role. In fact, even last year before the Jets made the switch of Tippmann from center to guard, I wondered whether maybe Tippmann was more valuable to the Jets at the guard position because that gives him a chance to utilize that one-on-one blocking. He's really good at that. He's a good blocker. I love Tippmann at guard. But there's another reason that I don't love the idea of moving Tippmann back to center, particularly midseason, is you don't want to shuffle the line too much. Offensive lines are really big on chemistry and continuity. And if you move Tippmann back to center, now you're not just changing one position, you're changing two positions. And you're going to have a new guard next to Armand Membu, and Membu's going to have to figure out how to build chemistry with this guy on the fly, and that's really tough. Whereas if you just put in Xavier Newman-Johnson, and look, Jets should be scanning the waiver wire. If there's a better backup center, there should be somebody better than Xavier Newman-Johnson. On cutdown day, go get him. But if you're replacing Myers with a center, well, then then you're not throwing the offensive line into as big a state of chaos. You'll still have Tippmann next to Bembu. Those two have worked together for a year, so you'll have the chemistry there. And I think it's just less chaotic to have one lineman replaced than two. So I look. I think it's a valid question. It's a good question, and I can understand the other side of the argument. But for me, I'd rather see Tippmann stay at guard. Now, you're on the Locked On Jets podcast. Stay tuned because we're talking about everyone's new favorite player, Mory Bamba. Unfortunately, he's injured, and that injury has left the Jets with a bit of a dilemma that we'll discuss continuing here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually is not deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. And that's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. I don't just tell you about Game Time, I use it. I went to see the Jets play their preseason opener Friday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, got last-minute tickets, amazing seats, second level, right behind the field goal post for $22. I've used Game Time to see Broadway shows, U.S. Open tennis, college football bowl games, you name it. Every single time I've gotten a great deal at the last minute. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Wednesday, we're doing our weekly mailbag show. Let's continue now. Our next question. John, Mory Bomba was definitely the New York Jet I was rooting for in 2026. Unfortunately, as a UDFA, his injury has put making the roster into serious jeopardy. Contract-wise, by overthecap.com, Bomba has a guaranteed salary of $13,750. What if this works? What if Bomba doesn't make the team? How does his injury affect his roster status? This is a really good question. It gets kind of complex. So technically, you cannot cut a player who's injured. So let's say Bomba's injury keeps him out the rest of preseason. Let's say he's still injured heading into cut down day. There are really two options in front of a team like the Jets for a player like Bomba. One is they can stash him on injured reserve. And that essentially means they keep him under contract and they don't need to use one of their 53 roster spots on him. So that could be an option. There's a catch, though, is on cut down day, you can only place two players on injured reserve if you want them to return during the season. So everybody else, you get two spots of guys who can return. Everyone else is done for the year. Now, if you wait 24 hours, you put him on the initial 53-man roster, then put him to IR, then he can come back in 4 weeks. So little bit of dynamics there. And with the Jets having so many players banged up in training camp, I don't know that you'd want to use one of your two spots on Bomba because there might be some other guys who have to go to IR who you want to bring back. The other option is, while you cannot technically cut a player, you can come to what's known as an injury settlement, where the team and the player agree, okay, we're going to agree to this player being cut. And as long as the player gives it the blessing, then it's okay. But typically that requires some sort of financial commitment. So sometimes you'll see that a player and a team have reached an injury settlement, which means the players agreed, okay, fine, you can cut me in exchange for, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000, different finances for every player. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. So you could also do an injury settlement. But I think I speak for many Jets fans when I say, Jets, keep Mory Bomba. Find a way to keep this dude. I think we all love him. We've watched him play one preseason game, and he's like everybody's new favorite player because, first of all, most of us had not heard of him prior to this game on Friday. And even those of us who had heard of him weren't expecting big things. And he played well. Not only did he play well, you loved his playing style. He was just such a fun guy to watch. The competitiveness, the feistiness. That's the kind of guy we want around here. That's the kind of guy we want to develop. So I'm hoping it doesn't come to that. I'm sure you're hoping it doesn't come to that. Mory Bomba, please get well soon. We want to see some more football. I mean, it sounds like he's probably going to be out the rest of the exhibition season. But, man, if there's a way to get that guy back on the field, oh, man, we really want to see it. Let's move on now. Our next question. John, With the injuries to Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis, may the Jets need to sign another running back just to have enough guys to compete in these preseason games? That's an interesting question. I don't think they'll need to. Now, I think it's true that you don't want to overload Braylon Allen with carries in the exhibition season because until Breece gets back, he's your number one back. And without Isaiah Davis, you don't have insurance. I also don't think you want to give a ton of carries to Kene Nwangwu because, first of all, you value what he can do as a return guy. And second of all, this is a guy who's had a tremendous amount of trouble staying on the field. This is a guy who's been injured over and over and over during his brief Jets career. You look at the rest of the Jets roster, there are a couple of other rookie running backs. There's Sam Scott out of Wyoming. There's Trip Trayanum out of Toledo. So, those are guys who could get the bulk of the carries in the last couple of preseason games if you don't want to overload Allen or Nwangwu. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the Jets just sign another running back, and it's probably be a running back who really doesn't have a chance to make the 53-man roster, but you may do it just to give yourself another body, another guy who you can give carries to just to get through these exhibition games. And again, this goes to a broader discussion of, should we have 3 preseason games at this point? If the reps aren't going to go to starters, if the reps aren't going to go to key backups, if the reps aren't going to go to true developmental players, do we really need 3 games? I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I really don't think it's necessary. Let's move on now. Our next question. John, as excited as I am about Bamba, it was the case of a preseason star. Don't most of these guys ultimately not make a big impact? Can you name any Jets who started in preseason who eventually became players for the team? You are right. In most cases, preseason stars don't usually make an impact over the long run for the team once we get to regular season games. It does happen occasionally, though. I'll give you one example, Snacks Harrison. Back in 2013, Jets signed this nose tackle, Antonio Gary, who had a long career with the Chargers, was a good player. And many of us, myself included, thought that this is your starting nose tackle. He's going to do a good job in Rex Ryan's defense. Well, Snacks Harrison stepped up. He was in his second year. He was a UDFA, and he looked great in the preseason. I mean, man, I still remember that Snacks Harrison preseason. You start out, it was kind of like Bomba. It was like, who is this guy? And he's going out there playing great. And the Jets eventually cut Antonio Gary. And, on my website, gangreennation.com, we have a saying, who's going to get Garried? And it's about Antonio Gary. It's about a guy who signs who you think is going to have a big role with the Jets, and he ends up getting cut before the season starts. And it's because of Snacks Harrison. Another example would be 2016 Robbie Anderson, who was a superstar of that preseason and did not do a whole lot that rookie year in 2016, but eventually turned into a starting receiver and a pretty good deep threat for the Jets. So, doesn't always happen. There are more David Clowneys and Brett Ratliffs than there are Snacks Harrisons or Robbie Andersons, but there is some hope. We can always dream, especially Bamba. Like, we're not going to, only positive thoughts about Mory Bamba on this podcast. That's what I say. I think he's not just my new favorite player. I think he's everyone's new favorite player. So hopefully Mory Bamba gets well soon and he plays well and he joins that pantheon of Jets preseason stars who end up being good players in this league. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Hope you have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets. Talk to you then.